In 1912 Patton was selected to represent the United States at the Olympic Games in Stockholm, Sweden. There he competed against military officers from around the world in the modern pentathlon, an event that included swimming, pistol shooting, running, fencing, and riding. Patton made a respectable showing, coming in 5th out of 42 contestants. He had learned fencing at West Point and continued his study of swordsmanship while in Europe. Later, while attending the Mounted Service School in Fort Riley, Kansas, Patton was designated an instructor of swordsmanship and received the title Master of the Sword. In that role he designed the U.S. Model 1913 enlisted cavalry saber, known as the Patton sword. Patton also loved polo, and he played it, like he pursued so many things, with a violent, reckless abandon, frequently injuring himself in the process. Biographer Martin Blumenson has suggested that his frequent head injuries may have contributed to the erratic behavior attributed to him in his later years. Patton saw his first combat soon after leaving Fort Riley. When Mexican revolutionary Pancho Villa led an attack on the border town of Columbus, New Mexico, in 1916, Patton joined the staff of Brig General John J. Pershing and accompanied him on a punitive expedition into Mexico. Though the mission failed to apprehend Villa, Patton was responsible for leading a raid that killed 3 of Villa's men. The attack garnered much publicity and was notable for being the first time that automobiles had been used in combat by the U.S. Army. When the United States entered World War I in April 1917, Pershing was made the commander of the American Expeditionary Force, AEF, and Patton, promoted to captain, joined him in France. In November 1917, Patton, now a major, left Pershing's headquarters staff and became the first officer to be appointed to the new U.S. Army Tank Corps. Over the next months he organized, trained, and even designed the uniforms for the new tank units. He was also promoted to lieutenant colonel. On September 12, 1918, Patton, ignoring orders to stay in radio contact, personally led the first U.S. tank units into battle during the Saint-Mihiel offensive. In the Meuse-Argonne offensive a few weeks later, Patton was badly wounded by a machine gun bullet. He lay in a shell hole for hours before it was safe to evacuate him, but he refused to be taken to the hospital until he had reported to his commander. He was promoted to the temporary rank of colonel and was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross for bravery under fire. During the demobilization that followed World War I, Patton reverted to the permanent rank of captain. He graduated with distinction from the Army War College in 1932, and he remained a vigorous proponent of tank warfare throughout the interwar years. He was promoted to colonel in 1938 and temporary brigadier general in 1940. On April 4, 1941, he was promoted to temporary major general, and a week later he was made commander of the 2nd Armored Division. Soon after the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7, 1941, Patton organized the Desert Training Center near Indio, California, to simulate combat and maneuvers in the harsh North African climate. Patton was commanding general of the Western Task Force during the successful U.S. landings at Casablanca in November 1942. He was promoted to the temporary rank of lieutenant general in March 1943 and led the U.S. 7th Army into Sicily, employing his armor in a rapid drive that captured Palermo in July and Messina in August. The apogee of Patton's career came with the dramatic sweep of his Third Army across northern France in the summer of 1944 in a campaign marked by great initiative, ruthless drive, and disregard of classic military rules. Prior to the Normandy invasion, he was publicly placed in command of the 1st U.S. Army Group, Fusag, a fictitious army whose supposed marshalling in eastern England helped to deceive German commanders into thinking that the invasion would take place in the Pas-de-Calais region of France. Patton's armored units were not operational until August 1, almost 2 months after D-Day, but by the end of the month, they had captured Mayenne, Laval, Le Mans, Reims, and Chalons. As German resistance in Normandy began to collapse, a pocket formed between advancing British and American forces that threatened to trap 2 German armies at Falaise. Patton desperately wanted to complete an encirclement of the Germans, but his commander, General Omar Bradley, feared that such an attack would leave Patton's flanks weak and exposed to counterattack. By the time the gap between Falaise and Argentan was closed on August 20, some 20,000 to 40,000 Germans had escaped. As the Third Army approached the German border, the advance was slowed because of supply shortages, but it was not stopped until it met the strong German defenses at Nancy and Metz in November. In December 1944 the Germans launched a massive surprise counterattack in the Ardennes forest, encircling the U.S. 101st Airborne Division at Bastogne, Belgium. Supreme Allied Commander General Dwight D. Eisenhower ordered the Third Army to relieve Bastogne, and Patton repositioned his force with astonishing speed. Such a feat was made possible in large part by Patton's intelligence officer, Colonel Oscar Koch, who had predicted the German offensive on the basis of a shrewd analysis of enemy troop strength and disposition. Advance elements of the Third Army reached Bastogne's tenacious defenders on December 26, and additional reinforcements followed over subsequent days. Patton's forces continued to push the Germans back, and by the end of January 1945, the Third Army had reached the German frontier. On March 1 those forces took Trier, precipitating one of the most famous exchanges of the war. When Patton received a message instructing him to bypass the city because it would take 4 divisions to capture it, Patton replied, "Have taken Trier with 2 divisions. Do you want me to give it back?" Over the next 10 days, they cleared the entire region north of the Moselle River, trapping thousands of Germans. They then joined the 7th Army in sweeping the Saar and the Palatinate, where they took 100,000 prisoners. Patton had wanted to push on to Berlin, but Eisenhower rejected the idea, deeming the cost too high for a city already allotted to the Soviets by the terms of the Yalta Agreement. Patton's supporters claim that the Cold War may have unfolded differently had the West taken the capital, but this largely ignores the military situation on the ground in Eastern Europe. By VE Day, May 8, 1945, Patton's Third Army had fought for 9 months since becoming operational, capturing more than 80,000 square miles, more than 200,000 square kilometers, of territory. During that time the Third Army suffered roughly 137,000 casualties, but it had inflicted more than 10 times that on the enemy. After the German surrender, Patton campaigned vigorously for a command in the Pacific Theater in the ongoing war against Japan. This failed to materialize, and he was instead made the military governor of Bavaria, a political position for which he was ill-suited by training and temperament. His public criticisms of the Allied post-war denazification policy in Germany, coupled with ill-advised comments to the press, led to his removal from the command of the Third Army in October 1945. Patton's final command was to head the 15th U.S. Army in Bad Nauheim, Germany, where he oversaw the writing of a history of the war in Europe, a role Patton described as serving as an undertaker at my own funeral. On December 9, 1945, Patton sustained serious injuries to his head and spine in a low-speed car accident. After 12 days of terrible pain, he died. A number of books and films have advanced conspiracy theories suggesting that the outspoken Patton was actually assassinated on orders from either Washington or Moscow. However, such accusations tend to rely on circumstantial evidence, and no definitive proof of any conspiracy has emerged. Patton's strategy and mindset planning was always created controversy. So let's know some big controversy of George Patton. Controversies and appraisal of George Patton. In time Patton's legacy has come to be defined by his controversial and sometimes erratic behavior almost as much as by his martial prowess. When a pair of mules blocked a bridge during the Sicily offensive in 1943, halting his armored convoy and making it vulnerable to enemy fire, Patton personally shot the animals and ordered them pushed off the bridge. 2 of Patton's men were tried in connection with the killing of dozens of Italian and German prisoners of war in southern Sicily. On July 14, 1943, which came to be known as the Biscari Massacre, both claimed that they were following orders not to take prisoners that Patton himself had set forth in a fiery speech to their division a month earlier. Patton denied responsibility, and he was exonerated of any crime. Patton was sharply criticized for a pair of incidents in August 1943, when he physically struck hospitalized soldiers who exhibited no outward signs of injury. On August 3, Patton visited the 15th Evacuation Hospital outside Nicosia, Sicily, where he encountered Private Charles Cole, who appeared to be unwounded. When asked what he suffered from, the soldier replied, "I guess I just can't take it." Patton cursed at the soldier, berating him as a coward, and then slapped his face with his glove and kicked him out of the tent. Cole was later diagnosed with chronic dysentery and malaria. On August 10, Patton repeated the scene at the 93rd Evacuation Hospital near San Stefano, Sicily. Private Paul Bennett had been diagnosed with combat fatigue, and upon seeing Bennett cry, Patton repeatedly slapped him, cursed him, and threatened to either send him to the front lines or have him killed by firing squad. Medical officers and a number of journalists quickly reported the incidents to Eisenhower, who reprimanded Patton by letter and ordered him to apologize to all concerned. Patton grudgingly did so, and Eisenhower, who could ill afford to lose Patton, asked reporters to bury the story for the sake of the war effort. News of the incidents broke in late November 1943. However, causing the uproar that Eisenhower had hoped to avoid. Many in the U.S. Congress and the press called for Patton to be sacked, and the Senate delayed Patton's promotion to permanent Major General. Although Patton kept his job, those incidents likely cost him a command role of ground forces in the Normandy invasion in June 1944. Historians generally agree that Patton was not only one of the greatest military leaders that the United States has ever produced but also one of the most complex and contradictory. Patton believed that it was critical for a general to stand out and to be seen by his troops, a philosophy that conveniently coincided with his ego. He dressed impeccably in a colorful uniform and knee-high boots, sporting ivory-handled pistols. Whether one liked him or loathed him, no one forgot him. He was a devout Christian who prayed morning and night, yet he was liberal with his use of profanity. He was also a staunch believer in reincarnation who was convinced that he had lived many previous lives as a warrior. Although he had many black soldiers under his command, notably, the 761st Tank Battalion, a segregated armored unit known as the Black Panthers, that won distinction on the battlefield, he nevertheless saw African Americans as inferior and disparaged their performance in combat. He helped to liberate numerous concentration camps, but he privately made virulently anti-Semitic statements during the occupation of Germany. Whatever demons he struggled with, and likely there were many, Patton possessed a genius for war like few others in history. But Patton's role of World War II was very interesting and grateful. What you think about Patton's strategy and planning mindset of war? So we meet coming next historical story. Please, if you like video then please subscribe and share. Thanks dude.